Camilla watched everything shift in a single afternoon. It happened fast, almost too fast to process. King Charles III and Prince William moved quickly, ordering royal jewelry to be taken away without hesitation. Camilla had spent years building her position, step by step. But this wasn't just about glittering pieces locked in a vault. Something deeper was hiding underneath it all. 2 sealed royal journals, locked away until 2122. What could possibly be written in those pages that triggered such a sudden reaction? And did Charles make sure the full truth stayed buried on purpose? We're breaking down why King Charles and William shut Camilla out of the royal jewels, even after everything she believed she had secured. Back in April 2005, Camilla Parker Bowles walked into Windsor Guildhall already knowing her place would come with limits. She didn't walk in expecting applause. She walked in prepared to prove herself over time. The years that followed weren't glamorous. They were about holding steady and not falling apart under pressure. The Church of England had refused to host the wedding, and that alone spoke volumes. There was no grand cathedral moment, no massive public celebration, nothing that screamed national approval. The choice of venue made it clear the monarchy wasn't asking the country to celebrate this marriage. Camilla saw exactly what it meant, and she didn't push back or complain. She accepted it and kept moving forward. She took on the slow, quiet work of building her place in a system that still hadn't fully accepted her. What came next was 17 years of controlled, careful public behavior that rarely got any credit. She showed up to every event she was expected to attend, handled overseas tours, and stood beside Charles at formal dinners and major ceremonies without causing headlines. The press kept watching, waiting for her to slip even once. She stayed consistent, wearing what was expected, saying exactly what needed to be said, and giving tabloids almost nothing to twist into scandal. They kept writing anyway, sticking to their usual narrative, but they couldn't point to a real mistake because there wasn't one. Over time, that constant pressure started to ease, little by little. Then came a moment that changed everything in February 2022. Queen Elizabeth marked 70 years on the throne with a statement, and one line hit harder than anyone expected. She openly said it was her sincere wish for Camilla to be known as Queen Consort when Charles became king. Not a softened title, not a compromise, but the full role beside the crown. That wasn't speculation anymore. That was the final word from the one person who had absolute authority on the matter. 7 months later, everything shifted again. Queen Elizabeth passed away at Balmoral on September 8, 2022. There was no dramatic announcement in that exact moment, no pause in time. But the change was immediate. As soon as Charles became king, Camilla became Queen Consort. That was the law, and nothing else needed to happen. While the country focused on mourning and the cameras stayed fixed on the late queen, Camilla's position had already been permanently upgraded behind the scenes. 14 months later, the world watched her coronation at Westminster Abbey. She stepped forward wearing the Cartier diamond palm leaf brooch, a piece tied directly to royal history, originally commissioned in 1938 and worn by Queen Elizabeth for years. Now it was pinned to Camilla in front of every camera watching. That moment made one thing clear: she was no longer on the outside. The monarchy didn't ease her in quietly anymore. They placed her front and center at one of the most watched events in decades. After that, her access to royal jewelry expanded in careful stages. The Greville tiara began appearing at major events, and pieces from the Queen Mother's historic collection started showing up during her official duties. None of those items belonged to her personally. That part never changed. Every piece was a loan, tied directly to the trust placed in her by the crown. And that trust hadn't come easy. It took nearly 2 decades to build. By early 2025, Camilla had something she was never guaranteed: real access to some of the most important jewelry in royal history, along with a level of acceptance few thought she would ever reach. She built that position slowly, without major mistakes, and everything depended on keeping the crown's confidence. Then suddenly, everything shifted again. On a Tuesday morning in May 2025, a royal treasurer arrived at Buckingham Palace expecting a routine audit. Instead, he walked into something completely unexpected. When the secured vault was opened, it was immediately clear someone had been there before him, and not through any official channel. What was taken raised serious questions. Why those specific items? Why risk everything for just 3 pieces out of an entire royal collection? The audit that day didn't just check inventory. It exposed something much bigger. Donald Walton had handled these audits for years without a single issue. When he arrived on May 6, 2025, nothing suggested this visit would be different. His task was simple: confirmed that every item matched the records. But within minutes of opening the vault, that routine check turned into a full investigation. 3 items connected to Queen Elizabeth II were gone. Not misplaced, not signed out, gone. The vault required high-level clearance, and yet there was no authorization record, no log, no explanation. That alone made it clear this didn't happen through any official process. The first missing piece was the sapphire Jubilee brooch, worn during the Queen's 65th Jubilee. It wasn't just valuable, it was part of one of the most widely recognized moments of her later reign. That image had been seen around the world. The second missing item made things even more serious. The double-strand pearl necklace worn at Princess Diana's funeral in 1997 was gone. That moment had been one of the most emotional and widely shared images in modern royal history. The value of that necklace went far beyond money. It represented a turning point the monarchy could never erase. Both losses were major, but the third discovery changed everything. Also missing were 2 leather-bound journals, handwritten by Queen Elizabeth during the global lockdown. These weren't meant to be seen, not anytime soon. They were legally sealed under Royal Collection Trust rules until the year 2122. No one, not family, not officials, not anyone, had the legal right to open them before then. And yet, they were gone. The Queen had sealed those journals on purpose, locked away for a generation that hasn't even been born yet. They were meant for readers with no personal memory of the events inside, no emotional ties, just the raw words on the page. Walton didn't waste a second. He pushed the situation up through official channels fast. Within hours, this was no longer a routine report. By the time King Charles received the full briefing, the tone inside the palace had already shifted in a serious way. One word disappeared instantly: missing. The new word being used behind closed doors was stolen. That change said everything. Charles didn't hesitate. He ordered a quiet internal investigation before the day even ended. Within 24 hours, security logs revealed something no one inside the palace expected to see. A palace guard had entered the restricted treasury wing before sunrise. At a time he had absolutely no reason to be there. No schedule, no assignment, nothing that justified his presence. So who sent him? And how did someone know exactly how to get into a vault protected by the highest level of royal clearance? King Charles brought in Sir Clement Meister, a senior intelligence figure known for handling sensitive royal matters. His instructions were sharp and clear. Find out what happened, how it happened, and who was behind it, and keep everything completely contained inside palace walls until the full picture was clear. The first major breakthrough came straight from the logs. Records showed palace guard Robert Halton entered the restricted treasury wing at 3:49 a.m. on April 27th, almost 2 hours before his shift even started. That alone raised alarms. He moved through secured corridors and accessed an area that required clearance he had no reason to use at that hour. There was no maintenance request, no supervisor approval, no record explaining why he was there. Nothing. When investigators questioned Halton, he denied everything at first. Flat, steady, no hesitation. But under pressure, his story started falling apart. Eventually, he admitted he had entered the vault, but claimed he did it after receiving a call through an internal palace phone line. The person on the other end knew personal details about his life. Details that weren't public. They knew about his family's financial struggles, his wife's medical treatment, and the debt tied to her care. That wasn't random, that was targeted. The caller implied they had senior authority within the royal household and told him the request had been approved at the highest level. Halton insisted he believed he was following legitimate orders. He also maintained he never personally removed anything from the vault. It didn't matter. He was suspended immediately. Before questioning even wrapped, he was escorted out of the building and his access was shut down on the spot. But the investigation didn't stop there. Attention shifted to the phone call itself. How did a call like that reach a guard without setting off any monitoring system? That gap turned out to be critical. Investigators discovered that phone lines inside the private residential areas of the palace were running on an older system, completely separate from the main monitored network. That system had never been fully updated or brought under modern oversight protocols. That flaw made the call possible, and nearly impossible to trace unless someone knew exactly where to look. Even as they continued verifying Halton's claims, one detail stood out above everything else: the origin of the call. When Sir Clement's team tracked it down, the result was clear and direct. The call didn't come from outside. It didn't come from an unknown device. It came from inside Buckingham Palace, specifically from the private residential wing assigned to Queen Camilla. That was the first direct link pointing toward her, and it wouldn't be the last. The next piece of evidence came from something no one had been watching, a simple, routine moment that turned into a major discovery. Eleanor Hartridge, a staff member working in the Queen Consort's residential wing, was going about her usual duties when something caught her eye. A rabbit-shaped jewelry box sat slightly out of place beneath a wardrobe. That small detail didn't sit right with her. When she picked it up, it felt far heavier than it should have for a decorative box. That's when she noticed a faint seam along the base. She pressed along the lining carefully, and suddenly, the bottom lifted open. Inside, wrapped and hidden, was the sapphire Jubilee brooch. At that point, the situation escalated fast. Investigators now had a traced phone call, confirmed vault access logs, and a stolen item recovered from a concealed space, all leading back to the same wing and the same person. Sir Clement didn't wait. He brought everything straight to King Charles before the day ended. Charles reviewed it all, piece by piece, then sent a direct message asking Camilla to come to his private study. When she arrived and heard what he asked, her response introduced something unexpected. Something even Charles hadn't anticipated. The real question now wasn't just what happened. It was whether any part of her explanation could actually be proven. The room was quiet. No staff, no advisors, no formal setup. Just Charles, Camilla, and the evidence laid out under a single lamp. The sapphire Jubilee brooch sat between them on the desk, impossible to ignore. People nearby later said Camilla's eyes went straight to it the second she walked in. There was a brief moment of recognition, quick but noticeable, before she regained composure. It looked like someone who already knew exactly why she had been called. Charles didn't waste time. He asked one direct question. How did a piece from the royal collection end up hidden inside her private quarters? The truth was, he already had the full picture before she even spoke. The phone call traced back to her wing. The vault access logs were confirmed. The brooch had been found and officially reported. Sir Clement's team had already connected every dot. This wasn't about finding answers anymore. It was about what Camilla would say next, and how far things were about to go. She pushed back immediately against any claim of theft. According to her, the brooch had been promised to her years earlier in a private conversation with Queen Elizabeth. She described it as a personal understanding, something quietly agreed between them, never written down, never witnessed, and impossible to verify now. In her version, she hadn't taken anything unlawfully. She had simply collected what was already hers through that promise. And with no one able to confirm or deny it, the claim sat in a gray area. That explanation only covered the brooch, but it left a much bigger question unanswered. When it came to the journals, Camilla didn't deny taking them, not at all. But her reasoning took the situation in a completely different direction. She told Charles that during the lockdown, Queen Elizabeth had written private thoughts, doubts, reflections, personal concerns. And if those words were read decades from now by people who didn't understand the context, they could seriously damage his reign. She said she wasn't acting for herself. She was trying to protect him from future fallout that no one alive today would be around to explain. Charles listened carefully, without showing any clear reaction. He didn't interrupt, didn't argue, didn't reveal what he was thinking. When she finished, he gave almost nothing back. Then he told her one thing. Come back later that afternoon. This decision wasn't going to be made quietly in that room. It was going to happen somewhere else, with 5 people sitting at a table. And by the time Camilla returned, the outcome may have already been decided. Because 2 of those people, Charles and William, had already spent the morning working through exactly what would happen next. The question now was simple and serious. Would William's presence push Charles to go further than anyone expected? Later that afternoon, the heavy oak doors of the palace war room shut tight behind 5 figures, and what happened inside would change everything. King Charles sat at the head of the table, steady and controlled. Prince William was right beside him, silent but fully locked in. Princess Anne and Prince Edward took their places, while Camilla sat across from the 2 men who had already spent hours deciding how this would go. No one needed an explanation. They all knew exactly why they were there. Charles didn't raise his voice or show emotion. Instead, he laid out the evidence piece by piece with precise control. The missing items. The vault access log showing Halton entering before dawn on April 27th without authorization. The internal phone call traced straight to Camilla's residential wing, and the hidden compartment where the brooch had been discovered during a routine cleaning. Every detail landed clearly, with no theatrics and no hesitation. It was the approach of someone who had already processed everything and was now acting on responsibility, not reaction. Camilla repeated her explanation, almost exactly as before. She stood by the claim that the brooch had been promised to her privately by Queen Elizabeth years earlier. No paperwork, no witnesses, nothing that could be verified. But she insisted it had been a genuine understanding. As for the journals, she repeated her warning that their contents, read decades from now without context, could damage Charles's legacy in ways no one alive would be able to correct. Prince William didn't speak, not once. He sat completely still, and that silence carried serious weight. Everyone in that room understood what it meant. This was someone who had spent years watching how private decisions can shake a public institution. Someone who had already made up his mind long before entering that room. When Camilla finished, Princess Anne didn't soften at all. Her expression stayed firm, almost unshaken. The room fell into a heavy silence that stretched longer than anyone expected. Then Charles stood. He made it clear, there were rules that couldn't be bent, no matter who was involved. The legal framework protecting Queen Elizabeth's personal collection allowed zero exceptions. Nothing could be removed, accessed, or altered for nearly a century. Verbal promises didn't matter, not against written law. No one in the royal household, regardless of title or intention, had the authority to decide what parts of a monarch's legacy should be hidden from the future. Then came the decision, and it landed hard. All ceremonial duties were stripped, military titles removed, public engagements suspended indefinitely. Any access to the late Queen's personal collection completely revoked, and no rights would extend to any member of her family over those historic items under any circumstances. Then one final line closed the discussion completely. The monarchy survives through service and trust, and when that trust breaks inside its own walls, it places the strength of the crown at risk. No one argued, no one pushed back. The outcome had already been set by Charles and William before anyone sat down. Camilla had no role in what came next, and no way to change it. But the decision had been made behind closed doors, and the real challenge was just beginning. How do you quietly remove a sitting queen consort from Buckingham Palace before the world even notices? By the time London woke up on Monday, May 15th, it had already happened. Outside the palace gates, everything looked normal. Tourists gathering, cameras snapping, people moving through their day. No one had any idea that inside those walls, a major shift had already taken place. In the early hours of that morning, Camilla was gone. She had been moved to Ray Mill House in Wiltshire, her private residence, handled with precision and complete discretion. No announcement, no public moment, no acknowledgement at the gates. But behind the scenes, the changes were immediate and impossible to ignore if you knew where to look. Her name vanished from the royal circular. Scheduled appearances disappeared without explanation. Within 3 days, charities connected to her patronages received formal notices. Everything was under review, and several associations were paused immediately. Then came the public moment. At exactly 9 p.m. the night before her departure, King Charles addressed the nation in a pre-recorded message from his private study. He confirmed that items belonging to Queen Elizabeth had been recovered, and that a member of his household had faced consequences under royal protocol. He never said Camilla's name, not once, but it didn't matter. Within minutes, news networks cut into regular programming. The reaction hit fast, and it hit hard. Some called it necessary accountability. Others described it as a dramatic personal collapse happening in real time under global attention. What made it even more intense was the timing. After years of doubt, the public had only recently started accepting Camilla as queen consort. The coronation had shifted opinions. Her steady public work had slowly changed the narrative. And then, overnight, it was all gone. The title disappeared, the role was empty, and life inside the monarchy moved forward without pause. Catherine continued appearing at major events wearing pieces from the royal collection. The system didn't slow down. It adjusted instantly. Everything Camilla had built over 2 decades vanished in a single afternoon. Titles, gone. Access, gone. Position, gone. But one question refused to go away. What was actually inside those journals? And how far had this situation really gone? When the vault was sealed again, this time under new digital codes controlled only by Charles and William, the investigation still didn't have every answer. Sir Clement's team examined the journals closely, looking for physical signs that they had been opened or read. The results were recorded, but kept strictly inside palace records. Those familiar with the findings described them as inconclusive. The journals showed clear signs of being handled, moved, hidden, deliberately placed, but there was no definitive proof that any pages had actually been opened. That uncertainty stood out. Camilla never directly addressed whether she had read them, not in the private meeting and not in the war room. The official records reflected that gap clearly. The investigation confirmed key facts: who took the journals, how the vault was accessed, and how the items were hidden afterward. But it could not confirm the one detail that mattered most. Had she actually read them? Charles had the opportunity to press for that answer, but he didn't. He closed both discussions without forcing that question into the open. The final report was completed, delivered, and locked into palace archives. It was never shared publicly. The items were returned to the vault, and new security measures were put in place immediately. From that point forward, access required dual authorization from both Charles and William, no exceptions. With that system, the vault became more secure than ever before. And inside it, those two leather-bound journals sat exactly where they were always meant to be, sealed, protected, and completely out of reach. They remain locked until 2122, intended for a generation that doesn't yet exist. What Queen Elizabeth wrote during those isolated lockdown months is still unknown to everyone connected to the events of that year. Camilla had claimed the contents could damage Charles's reign, but whether that fear came from something she actually saw or something she only believed might be there, remains the one question no report could answer. Charles reviewed that uncertainty and made his decision anyway. He didn't force the truth out into the open. He didn't make it part of the public record. And those closest to what happened were left with one detail that still hasn't been resolved. No official account will ever confirm whether Camilla risked everything for words she had actually read, or for something she only imagined might exist inside those pages.